Hello, everyone. Let's talk about collaborative problem solving. What a great opportunity to engage your team and teach them how to solve problems on purpose. One of the things that I hear a lot in my leadership sessions is that people want more problem solving on their team. Leaders do. And if you got my free resource that talks about why we sometimes don't get good problem solving, is because sometimes as leaders, we go ahead and solve the problems on our own. Well, and the reality is that we believe that that's part of our job, but also it's less time consuming and we believe it's more efficient and is going to lead to a better result. Unfortunately, what that does is, bummer, it doesn't help our team to become good problem solvers themselves. So, we're going to talk a little bit about why structured problem solving can even increase your effectiveness as a leader, but also how do you get your team involved in problem solving so they think it's fun. So, the value to you as a leader of doing this is one, you'll get more sustainable solutions, but also it's going to be more efficient and effective in the long run. Another thing is it'll enhance your credibility with more senior leaders if you have demonstrated that you've looked at a problem from all sides, you've come prepared with facts and data and great recommendations. And also, you'll be able to advocate for your own solutions in a much more credible way if you do this process right. And then last but not least, it's a win-win for your team because you can spend time on more high gain areas. So let's talk about problem solving. And there are a bunch of problem solving processes out there. You can Google this and find anywhere from 3 to 8, probably more, steps in a problem solving process. Today, we're just going to look at a few key steps in this 5-step process, which begins with defining the problem, then analyzing the cause of the problem, looking at different options, picking the best one, and then evaluating. So for each of these 5 steps, we're not going to go through all the details of how to do each one, as much as just look at a key few areas that I see the biggest pitfalls when managers use this problem solving process. And it starts with defining the problem. This is by far the most important step in the process. And to tell you the truth, most people don't define problems effectively. Well, why is that? Because most of us tend to define problems and instead we identify solutions that we want versus problems. Because the reality, a problem is a gap. So if we can create a gap statement, the difference between what we have and what we not, what we want, it's going to help us and serve us well throughout the whole problem solving process because it's going to open up more options for us to explore. So, for example, if we said service satisfaction is at an 85, but we want it at a 95%, maybe that's our goal. There's a 10% gap. Or maybe our turnover rate has increased to 25%. We want it at 15%. 10%, big gap. So here's the difference in thinking about these kind of statements. It's the difference between I need a car. Imagine your 16-year-old saying that versus I need to get out to work, or maybe I need a way to get to school and work. Those are two very different statements because if I need a way to get to work, that opens the world of possibilities, right? Not just a car, but it could be an Uber, it could be a bus, it could be walking, it could be car ride sharing, whatever it is. So a car in this situation is actually the solution versus I need a way to get to work is actually the gap. So here are some examples of ineffective problem solving statements that I hear a lot. We need training. And quite frankly, I've been in training for 30 years. I hear that and I think, yay me. Okay, I'll get to go train. But I always think, why? Why do you think training is the issue? What's the real gap? Training is only one solution. Or we need to hire more staff. If you go to your manager right now, and quite frankly, anyone goes to anyone's manager right now and asks for more staff, you're probably going to get a big fat no. And that's a solution. It's not necessarily a gap. The same with these statements. The morale is bad, technology is outdated, our customers are complaining, whatever it is, these are very ineffective problem statements. And they don't really lend themselves to starting off the problem solving process on a good foot. Here are some that do. Turnover rate, we mentioned that one. Maybe 3 of our last 5 projects have missed the implementation date. That's over half. That's a pretty significant number and a big gap. Or maybe customer complaints actually have increased, but by 30% in 6 months. Or if we need more staff, it isn't about needing more staff, it's about how much man-hour do you need to produce the output that's required. And if you frame it that way, it's more factual, it's more evidence-based, it's going to be a more compelling argument for what you need to explore as opposed to hiring more people. Once we do this, have a problem and define it effectively, then we can much more effectively analyze the cause. Couple fun tools that we can use before we go to the rest of the options or the rest of the steps in this process to analyze the cause. We're going to take a look at 2 of them. One is called affinity diagramming and one is called the 5 whys. Both of these tools, super fun to do in your team. Affinity diagramming is something that maybe you're familiar with, but you just didn't know what it was called. It uses Post-it notes and you look for patterns or themes. So here's how it works. You identify a problem, have everybody take 2 Post-it notes and write 1 cause per Post-it note. You group them on a table, you look for the themes, and then the one that has the biggest theme is potentially the biggest cause of the problem. Now, this isn't evidence-based, so it's not, looking for data, but it certainly is subjective, and subjective opinions from people who work very closely to a problem probably have a good insight into what the cause would be. So here's an example. Let's say that our sales are down. They're down 10% from last night. We get our group together and we say why. They each get 2 Post-it notes and they write them down. They have input from the group. Then we ask the group to put them into themes. So they actually do the work. I would encourage you to get back and kind of observe and have them think about what those themes are. What does that mean? Because whatever is the biggest theme, in this case, it would be training, then that's the most significant potential cause. We can cascade that down to the next step in the problem-solving process, which is what the heck are we going to do about it? How do we provide good training for our team? So it's a really easy exercise to do. It can be done in 10, 15 minutes, and you get a lot of collaboration and a lot of input from your group. It's really super fun. Another tool is called the 5 whys. And again, I'm confident that you've probably heard of this before. If you have any small children around and they incessantly follow you around and say, why? It's exhausting, but there's also a reason to it too. So the purpose to the 5 whys is getting also at root cause. So each person on the team or in a team answers 5 whys. Again, we want to make this as evidence or fact-based as we can. But once we get to the 5 whys, potentially we're at the root cause. If we're not, you can ask more than 5. 5 is just a guide. Here's an example. Why are sales down 20% from the last quarter? Well, the answer to that question is we weren't able to produce enough product. So we take that same answer and that creates our next question. So these are not different questions. We're cascading the answer as the next question. So why can't we produce enough product? Because we've reached our production capacity. The next question is what? Right. Why have we reached our production capacity? Because we don't have enough qualified developers. Well, why not? Well, we've used our training budget. Why have we done that? Because the CFO cut the training budget. Bummer, to save money. So this is getting us to the cause of the problem from some evidence that we've gathered. And again, it's fun to do in a team. Sometimes people come up with different, the answer to the 5 whys may be very different. So encouraging people to use data, to use information and facts is really helpful, because if they get their opinions in there, then it could be swayed and you may get a lot of variation in the 5th answer to the question. But it's also really fun to do in a team because you'll find out too, what are people's different perspectives on this. So 2 ways to analyze root cause. 1 is the affinity diagramming and 2 is the 5 whys. Then we want to explore alternatives. So we're going to talk a little bit about exploring alternatives, but also implementing the best option. And we're going to take a look at the decision matrix. And decision matrix allows us to figure out what is our best option before we go ahead and evaluate it. I'm confident that you understand a decision matrix, even if you haven't used it at work, because we probably think about your last car that you bought, your home that you purchased. Chances are you had some ways that you were going to decide how you're going to buy or what car to buy or what home to buy. So decision criteria go at the top across the horizontal row. The options that you're exploring, let's say these are different cars you're taking a look at, go down the left-hand column. And a decision criteria, a couple best practices is if we determine the criteria first, it helps us to know how we're deciding and take some of the bias out, because I might find a car down here that I really want, and then I'm going to put criteria here that make sure that I'm going to pick out this car. Even if we don't do that consciously, we can have a lot of unconscious bias with our decision making. The second thing we do is brainstorm options. And then the third thing we do is rate or rank the options and identify the best choice. So let's take a look at this. Let's say we're trying to increase sales. Across the top, we look at we want to implement within 30 days. We want these things across the top to be as specific as possible, because the more specific they are, the more we can evaluate the different options and make sure they meet our needs. The second one, we want it to cost less than $5,000. We don't want any overtime for staff, and we don't want any negative impact on customer service. So what we're going to do is take a look at how would we rate each of these options. Creating a marketing campaign that's definitely doable within 30 days, no overtime, and probably not a negative impact on our staff. Also, conducting outside training, well, overtime for our staff would be something that would meet. Developing and implementing sales goals actually hits all three of these, and expanding our hours only hits the one, no negative impact on customer service. That's actually going to have overtime, cost less. So our best choice in this option is developing sales goals, because we can do that fast and we can do it less expensively. As we look at these, the decision matrix, and we see that's the strongest answer, the next tool that we can use that, again, I'm confident you've heard of or that you've probably even used, is a pro and con analysis, where we just list out in 2 columns, what are the pros, what are the cons? And for this, we're implementing sales goals. That's our potential solution. The pros is that, hey, people have had goals in the past and they're probably pretty comfortable with it. And that kind of competition could be really fun. We could also do it very quickly within the next week. And also, we know that just generally speaking, what gets measured does get done. However, even if we go around and we think this is the best option for us, there's going to be some cons, right? So maybe staff might feel pressured to sell. That might have a negative impact sometimes on customers, or competition could go the other way and really create morale problems in our staff. So the purpose of a pro and con analysis isn't necessarily to change our mind, but to take a look at the cons. Why did we make this decision, and what do we have going in our favor? But also on the cons, we want to be able to mitigate the risks associated with those cons. So as we go into implementation, how do we make sure to try to manage those risks and think about that as part of our implementation? So this is a really great use of the pro and con analysis. And again, your team will really get into it because it's pretty darn easy to do. So we've talked about defining the problem is important to get a gap. We can analyze the causes through an affinity diagram or through the 5 whys. We can also use a decision matrix to decide and explore alternatives, and also implement the best option. But from an implementation standpoint and evaluation standpoint, using a pro and con analysis can be super helpful. All of the tools in this mini module really are helpful around using in a team, and they really foster a lot of collaboration. The reality is, the more structured problem solving that you use, this can really impact your credibility and your ability to influence people towards your solution. The process also gives your employees a lot of discipline, and it gives them a roadmap to follow so that they can begin to solve problems more independently, which is really what you want in the long term. And it also teaches your employees to engage one another and strengthen the business. So, tools like this and an approach like this, I can't emphasize enough how helpful they are to get your team to learn a very sophisticated skill so that you can spend your time doing other things. With all that said, not every problem would lend itself to a problem solving process. But if you see patterns, or even if you want to have a staff meeting with your team to brainstorm on what are some of their biggest problems, that can jumpstart this process. So, congratulations on taking some time to learn about collaborative problem solving. As always, let me know if you have questions or share your successes in our discussion forum or on the Contact Me page. I would love to hear how this works for you. And in subsequent sessions, trust me, we'll have a lot more opportunity to focus on problem solving and introduce some additional collaboration tools. So, good luck, be amazing on purpose.